All right, good afternoon. A couple of programming notes. This week, tomorrow, I will be joined by Anjali Ashrakar, the Deputy Executive Director of UNAIDS. She will brief on the launch of the 2024 World AIDS Report entitled Take the Right Path. Sharon Birch, our good friend and spokesperson for the President General Assembly, will also brief you tomorrow. We will brief you on Wednesday, but not Thursday, given that it is a national holiday in our host country. And on Friday, the office and the building will be open, but we will just do a posted briefing of highlights. But the office will be staffed in case of more urgent news than we usually do. Hold on a second. Just another programming note that tomorrow will take place the annual special meeting in observance of the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian People, which is organized by the UN Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People. That will take place from 10 to 1 p.m. tomorrow in ECOSOC. The Deputy Secretary General, Mina Mohammed, will be there to represent the Secretary General. And today, November 25th, is the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. In his message, the Secretary General said it's been almost 30 years since the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action promised to prevent and eliminate violence against women and girls. It's beyond time to deliver, he said. And on this occasion, today, we will be joined very shortly by the Deputy Executive Director of UN Women, Nyaradzai Gumbansvanda, along with Delphine Schantz, the Director of the New York Office for the UN Office for Drugs and Crime, and Calliope Minjeru, the Chief of the Ending Violence Against Women section of UN Women. They will be here to present their report, Femicide in 2023, Global Estimates of the Intimate Family Member Femicides. Turning to Haiti, and on this International Day of the Elimination of Violence Against Women, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs is reiterating that the current crisis is having a disproportionate impact on women and girls in Haiti. According to our partners, between January and October of this year, 5,400 incidents of gender-based violence were reported, although the true figure is likely to be much higher. Critical services for survivors of gender-based violence, as well as for sexual and reproductive health, remain severely underfunded in Haiti. The UN Population Fund, UNFPA, has secured just 19% of the funding required for those services in 2024. That's $5.4 million in the bank out of the needed $28 million, leaving obviously significant gaps in addressing the urgent needs. UNICEF reports today that the number of children recruited by armed gangs in Haiti has surged by 70% over the past year, with some recruits as young as 8 years old. It is estimated that minors make up between 30 and 50% of all members of these groups. This is obviously an alarming trend, which is fueled by the closure of many schools, as well as displacement, leaving children increasingly alone and vulnerable. The Secretary General of these United Nations is in Portugal today to attend the 10th Global Forum of the UN Alliance of Civilizations, which is taking place in Cascais from today to the 27th of November. Tomorrow he will address the official opening ceremony, as well as the UN Alliance of Civilizations ministerial group of Friends high-level meeting. On the sidelines, the Secretary General will have bilateral meetings with a number of heads of delegations who will be in attendance at the forum. He will also have bilateral meeting with the President of Portugal, Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, and the Prime Minister, Luis Montenegro. His remarks, obviously, will be shared with you. And you will have seen that over the weekend we issued a statement at the conclusion of COP29 in Baku, in which the Secretary General said that while he had hoped for a more ambitious outcome on both finance and mitigation, the agreement that countries adopted provides a base to which to build. It must be honored in full, and it must be honored on time, he said, adding that commitments must quickly become cash. He also sent a message to young people and civil society representatives telling them that the fight continues and that the UN stands with them. And in Busan, in the Republic of Korea, the fifth session of negotiations on a global plastic pollution treaty started today. The session aims to conclude negotiations and finalize the text of the agreement. In a video message of the Secretary General urged member states to deliver a treaty that is ambitious, that is credible, and that is just, and that it is one that addresses the life cycle of plastics. And in case you had forgotten, every year we produce 460 million metric tons of plastic. Much of it is quickly thrown away. Plastic waste is dumped into our waters, killing marine life, getting into our bodies, and by 2050 there could be more plastic than fish in the ocean. And earlier today in Siem Reap in Cambodia, the Executive Secretary of the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, Armida Salsia Alicia Bana, spoke on behalf of the Secretary General at the Fifth Review Conference of the States Parties to the Convention of the Prohibition of the Use, Stockpiling, and Production and Transfer of Anti-Personnel Mines and on their destruction. The Secretary General said that anti-personnel mines represent a clear and present danger for civilians. By sharing its experience, by contributing expert deminers to the UN peacekeeping mission, he added, Cambodia is demonstrating how mine action can build lasting peace. For 25 years, this convention has driven important progress, but the threat of mines clearly remains. The Secretary General called on states parties to meet their obligations and encourage all those who have not yet acceded to the convention to do so. A world without anti-personnel mines is not just possible, it is within reach, he concluded. Turning to Lebanon, and I can tell you that we remain concerned by the escalation of hostilities between Hezbollah and the Israel Defense Forces, as well as the widespread destruction and loss of life across the Blue Line. The UN peacekeeping force in Lebanon, UNIFIL, is also concerned about numerous strikes on the Lebanese armed forces inside Lebanese territories, despite their declared non-involvement in the ongoing hostilities between Hezbollah and Israel. Recent attacks have claimed the lives of 45 Lebanese armed forces soldiers. That's what the LAF is telling us. Such attacks targeting LAF in Lebanese territory constitute a flagrant violation of Security Council Resolution 1701, as well as international humanitarian law, which limits the use of violence against those not participating in hostilities. We remain deeply alarmed by the escalation of hostilities and the widespread destruction and loss of life across the Blue Line. We urge all parties involved in the conflict to address their differences through negotiations and not through violence. UN Special Coordinator for Lebanon, Janine Hennis-Plasschaert, began a visit to Israel yesterday, where she's scheduled to meet with senior Israeli officials today. Discussions are expected to center obviously on the current crisis, the urgent need for a ceasefire, and a comprehensive implementation of Security Council Resolution 1701. Thank you for paying attention. On the humanitarian front in Lebanon, the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says the country is facing its deadliest period in decades, with an unprecedented humanitarian crisis affecting more than 1 million people. Over the past 3 days, Beirut's southern suburbs have been hit by relentless attacks, resulting in extensive damages and significant casualties, as well as forcing people to flee their homes. On average, 250 people have been killed every week in November, bringing the death toll to more than 3,700 since the escalation of hostilities in October of last year. That's what the data that we are receiving from national authorities. UNICEF is also reporting that between the 22nd and the 23rd of November of this year, at least 9 children were killed, including boys and girls who were sleeping in their beds. This brings the total number of child deaths to at least 240 since October of last year. In response to the escalating violence, the Lebanese authorities have announced closures of schools in Beirut and surrounding areas, shifting to remote learning today. This is obviously further disrupting the education of young people. Despite ongoing security concerns, we and our partners remain on the ground to try to scale up our efforts to continue providing critical assistance. As of 19 November, UNICEF has safely carried out 14 humanitarian convoys, reaching some 50,000 people in hard-to-reach areas. Additionally, UNICEF has helped displaced families living on the streets of Beirut, helping them find shelters amid a severe urban displacement crisis. And on the health front, the World Health Organization has delivered 48 tons of medical supplies to support the Lebanese Ministry of Public Health's chronic medication program, ensuring that 300,000 people with chronic conditions have continued access to essential medicines. And turning to Syria, a quick note from a statement by the Deputy Regional Humanitarian Coordinator for Syria, for the Syrian crisis, David Carden, who deplored attacks on the northwest of the country this weekend that led to civilian deaths and injuries. Mr. Carden called for the renewed protection of civilians. Some of the wounded were treated at a hospital supported by the World Health Organization. This comes at a time when more than 80 health facilities had fully or partially suspended operations by the end of last month due to lack of funding. The humanitarian response plan for Syria, which aims to reach 10.8 million human beings of the most vulnerable people across the country, is less than 30%, with just $1.2 billion received out of the $4 billion required. Heading south to the situation in Gaza, our colleagues from OCHA tell us that yesterday heavy rainfall caused flooding in multiple sites where displaced families are staying in Khan Yunis in Gaza City. People's tents and other belongings were damaged by the rains. OCHA and our humanitarian partners have been carrying out field visits in multiple areas to assess the impact of the latest rains, to mobilize efforts. Our partners estimate that 1.6 million people live in makeshift shelters across Gaza. In recent months, preparations ahead of the rainy seasons had been severely restricted by challenges aid agencies are facing in bringing sufficient supplies into Gaza. Our partners have assessed about 100 flood-prone areas, which is hosting more than 450,000 men, women, and children in Khan Yunis, in Deir al-Balah, and in the Rafah area. Nearly all of these sites, local groups are supporting with preparations for potential rains and floods. For example, sandbags have been installed at 20 sites. However, for 90% of the area assessed by our partners, there are no workable contingency plans if flooding were to render the site uninhabitable. In Gaza City, OCHA says our teams there estimate that dozens of families have been displaced following Saturday's evacuation orders by Israeli authorities for the eastern neighborhoods, namely Zaytun, Turkman, and Turkman al-Jadida. This is an area of approximately 2 square kilometers. In North Gaza Governorate, our humanitarian colleagues warn that Kamal Adwan Hospital has come under continued attacks over 48 hours, causing an additional 14 injuries, including among the hospital director and the very few remaining doctors and nurses there. And you will have seen that Mohanad Hadi, the Deputy Special Coordinator for the Middle East process, briefed the Security Council on behalf of Tor Venezuela. He told council members that the situation remains grave across the region. He said that Israeli military authorities operations continue across the blue line with Lebanon, as did the firing of rockets by Hezbollah towards Israel, including a barrage this weekend. He welcomed the ongoing diplomatic efforts to reach a cessation of hostilities and urged all parties to accept a ceasefire anchored in the full implementation of 1701. There was also condemnation of the ongoing violence in Gaza, as well as the continued holding of hostages. And this was Mr. Venezuela's last briefing to the Security Council as his mandate ends in early January. Turning to Sudan, Tom Fletcher, our new Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, is in the country, and that is his first field visit since he took office as OCHA chief. Mr. Fletcher said the Sudan crisis is one of, quote, staggering proportion, and it demands the world's attention. Today, Mr. Fletcher met with Sudanese authorities, including General al-Burhan, the president of the Transitional Sovereign Council. In his meetings, he discussed ways to address the constraints of the delivery of aid, the need to increase the presence of humanitarian personnel in areas worst affected by the crisis, and to scale up the response, and how to increase the delivery of aid across borders and across conflict lines. He underlined the importance of bringing attention to the suffering of civilians across the country. Yesterday in Kassala, Mr. Fletcher visited a center for children without parental care who'd had to be evacuated due to the violence. He also visited a camp for displaced people. Mr. Fletcher also took part in an event today in Port Sudan to mark the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. And from Sudan, Mr. Fletcher will go to Chad to meet with Sudanese authorities and host communities who generously supporting them, as well as local Chadian authorities and our partners. Further on Sudan, our colleagues at the World Food Program tell us that we now have a second domestic line for the humanitarian air service. And the first flight from Port Sudan to Dongola in northern state was completed yesterday. This new flight will enable humanitarian workers to expand their presence in northern Sudan and travel more quickly to Al-Dababa, a key transfer point for sending aid. And the head of our peacekeeping mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Bintou Keita, was in Angola over the weekend. She signed a memorandum of understanding with the Angolan Minister of External Relations, Tete Antonio, which formalizes the UN peacekeeping mission's support for the reinforced ad hoc verification mechanism, which launched in Goma earlier this month. You will recall that this mechanism is linked to the ceasefire in eastern Congo in place since August. The agreement signed this weekend includes information sharing and field reports. Ms. Keita reiterated our commitment to supporting Angola's facilitation efforts within the framework of the Luanda process, and to accompany all political and diplomatic initiatives aimed at achieving a peaceful resolution to the security and humanitarian crisis in eastern Congo. And coming to Europe and to Ukraine, the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us that attacks and hostilities across the country have continued over the weekend and today. According to local authorities and our local partners, the attacks result in scores of casualties, including children, significantly damaged civilian infrastructure, particularly in Kharkiv and Odessa and Zaporizhzhia. As a result of the damage, nearly 150,000 families, as well as hospitals, schools, and businesses, are currently without heating in the Dnipro, Ivanko, Frankivsk regions, where temperatures have dropped below 0 degrees centigrade. This is what local authorities are telling us. Humanitarian organization mobilized swiftly and provided emergency assistance in Kharkiv and Odessa, among other affected areas. They've delivered food, repair materials, and psychological support. And in the Philippines, our team there launched a $33 million appeal to support communities ravaged by the typhoons that have hit the country. Philippines has been hit by 6 typhoons in just 1 month, with the storms traversing the same path and impacting the same communities over and over again. This has been the most challenging typhoon season since 1951. That's more than 70 years, and it impacted more than 5.9 million people, leaving 2.6 million people displaced in need of immediate assistance. And lastly, a new resident coordinator, this one in Côte d'Ivoire. The Secretary General has appointed Hélène Ngarminganga of Chad as the resident coordinator in Côte d'Ivoire. She started work on the 24th of November with the agreement of the government. She brings more than 30 years of experience in development. She recently served as regional director for East Africa region for the French Development Agency, where she oversaw the agency's work in 11 countries. Congratulations. Edie, up to you.
Thank you, Steph. A couple of follow-ups. First, will Janine Hennis-Plashart be discussing a possible UNIFIL role in Lebanon with the Israeli government officials?
I don't want to get ahead of what she will be discussing, but broadly, she will be discussing, obviously, the situation in Lebanon, the need for a ceasefire, and the full implementation of 1701.
Okay. Secondly, on the rainfall, the heavy rainfall in Gaza. I remember that last week you talked about thousands and tens of thousands of tarpaulins waiting to get into Gaza. Have any of those been delivered? And secondly, is any aid at all getting into northern Gaza?
No updates on aid getting into northern Gaza, and on the tarpaulins, I will check the status.
And thirdly, this was, as you said, Tor Renaissance last briefing to the council. When are we going to learn his successor?
Probably about 20 minutes after I learn the name of his successor. Deji, Sylviane, then Margaret.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's flashing.
Yeah, so was mine.
Okay. Hold on, just wait. No, don't.
Try.
Hold on.
Hello.
There we
Okay,
go.
right. Okay. So first, to follow up also on the visit of the coordinators, the Lebanese coordinator. Will she talk about the ceasefire? Because we heard a lot of the reports that they even give a very specific date, that tomorrow evening that there will be announcement of the ceasefire.
I mean, she will of course discuss the need for a ceasefire. Again, I think things are moving quickly. I don't want to speculate, get ahead of anything that may happen. I think we think it is extremely important for the parties to this conflict to come to an agreement for a ceasefire and for the implementation of 1701.
Okay, a completely different topic, Philippines. We know that nowadays the president and the vice president now in Philippines, they are quite hostile. I don't know whether you know this or not. The vice president of Philippines
No,
on
I've
Saturday,
read the story. I'm aware of the story.
yeah, said that if he got assassinated, she got assassinated, she also contracted with some killer to kill the president. I mean, what has the Secretary General have to say on this kind of political threatenings?
I mean, we don't have any particular comment on this current crisis now, but I will get back to you if we do. Maggie, Sylviane. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Sylviane, sorry. I called on you for Sylviane. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Stéphane. We heard that it's Hezbollah and Israel.
Your
have,
microphone a little
reached-
closer, thank you.
Okay, we heard that Hezbollah and Israel have reached a possible ceasefire between the two parties for 60 days. The Lebanese people were not has not been consulted, first of all. And also Israel will be watching over the port, the airport, and the road leading to the border between Lebanon and Damascus. The two parties have agreed to implement Resolution 1701, which is the ultimate objective, is to the peace treaty between Lebanon and hopefully Lebanon, not Hezbollah, and Israel after 60
But
days.
what is your
My question, the
Sylviane?
Lebanese has, first of all, why the Lebanese people has not been consulted, and how much the role of the United Nations will be important in this 60 days. Thank you.
Well, again, we are not involved in these negotiations, so I at least have not seen the draft of a ceasefire agreement. As soon, I'm sure, something is announced and we can share something with you, we will on our reaction. I think it is important that people in Israel, people in Lebanon be able to return to at least a minimum a situation of cessation of hostilities. What we want to see is the full implementation of 1701, which is the mandate given by member states, given by the Security Council. I think the Secretary General's latest report on the implementation paints a pretty clear picture of where we are on the implementation or lack thereof. So again, like I told Deji, I don't want to get ahead of our skis. Let's see what is announced, and then we'll have time to comment. Margaret.
Steph, you mentioned that 45 Lebanese army soldiers have been killed, you said, in recent attacks. By recent, do you mean since Israel's invasion on October 1st of Lebanon, or do you mean like in the last week or two? I mean, how recent?
It's a valid question. Let me get
Okay,
back to you on
if
that.
you might have an
Okay.
answer. And then on Gaza, going back to that November 16 incident with the aid convoy, the 100 trucks, Mr. Hadi mentioned it today in the Security Council, and he said that 97 trucks were lost. So I'm just kind of wondering how 97 trucks can disappear into thin air. I would think that your Israeli partners have eyes in the sky and they could tell you where they are, or were they blown up? I mean, like, can you give us more
if
detail?
they've disappeared, we don't have any more details on where they've gone, whether they've gone in sheds, whether they've been taken apart, whether they've been destroyed. We just don't have that kind of intelligence. What we do know is that the goods that were on these trucks, the food that was meant for distribution by UNRWA and the World Food Program, will not be distributed to those who need it.
And have you asked COGAT or the Israeli authorities to
I'm
check
not
their
aware of any-
surveillance to see if they're
And
around?
the point is, we are not a police force that can go and, we don't have repo men who can go and take whatever trucks back. Our focus right now is just on getting more humanitarian aid, keeping the people safe and keeping our staff safe.
But trucks are not readily available, I would think. So if you've lost 100, that's going to really impact your
Yes,
aid
it
effort
will.
going forward.
Yes, it is.
So
We're
wouldn't
trying to get new trucks.
Okay.
Stefano,
Yes, thank you. It's a follow-up on Lebanon. Why the UN is not involved in finding the solution for a ceasefire?
look, the UN is involved in the sense that there is a solution, and it's the full implementation of 1701. Different conflicts have different mediators in the lead. We are supporting and all pushing in the same direction.
Are you, during the conversation between the parts or anything, is there somebody from the UN present? Is somebody, because you have 10,000 soldiers.
I know, and we also have, as you know, we have a tripartite mechanism involving UNIFIL, which brings the parties together. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Steph. I have a question about the latest tension between Iraq and Israel. As you know, the Foreign Minister of Israel said that he sent a letter to Security Council and called on the Security Council to act urgently to make sure that the Iraqi government meets its obligations under the United Nations Charter or law. So the question is, I mean, on the other hand, the Iraqi government receives that as a threat. And do you have any comment on that? And how concerned are you about the situation?
We're concerned about the continued escalation that we're seeing in the region, both in terms of actual kinetic activity and in terms of rhetoric. And I think it's, we very much hope that at least a cessation of hostilities agreement in Lebanon will help calm the situation, or at least move things in the right way. Okay. Abdelhamid, now we're ready for you.
Come across that
I-
incident.
Yeah, I don't have details of this specific operation, but I can, if you saw the statement jointly delivered by Mr. Hadi and Mr. Venesland, it referred to the ongoing violence in the West Bank and the toll it's having on civilians, Palestinian civilians, including children.
I did, but again, I just want to ask you, really, is there really 97 trucks or 98 had disappeared in Gaza? How can any human believe in that? If you cannot hide 97 bicycles in Gaza, how can they hide 97?
I don't know if you're
really-
asking a rhetorical question. I can only speak to what happened, right? It's not like we're sitting on the trucks and telling you they're gone and they're not gone. They're gone for us, okay? So, Deji.
Just to ask you for an update, UNDP's Yemen. Do you have any new update on that container?
No, the situation is
Are there
unchanged.
people who's like, how to say them, doing maintenance for that?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
cool.
they are. Okay, I will go get our guests. Do not move.